It is 7 o'clock. Good to see you this morning. With families feeling the squeeze, the Prime Minister is preparing to give his party conference speech on tackling problems like the economy. The timing of it, however, is on the day the universal credit uplift ends. Is raising the minimum wage the answer? We'll be asking the Justice Secretary on the show in just a few moments' time. Plus, as the debate about women's safety and police vetting continues, we'll ask the former Chief Constable of Greater Manchester how you reform an institution like the Met. Also on the show, the former British soldier arrested by the Taliban last month whilst trying to help hundreds of Afghans to leave. Well, he has now been flown out of Afghanistan. We'll be speaking to him about his amazing story just after 7:30. Also to come... And with farmers warning that more than 100,000 pigs could be culled rather than eaten this year due to a shortage of butchers, we'll ask two farmers, is the government making a pig's ear out of this? It is Wednesday, the 6th of October. More guts, less dithering. Boris Johnson will break with the past when he lays out his vision for Britain's future this morning. But what is his plan for hard-up families?
The universal credit uplift payment officially ends today. But what will it mean for people in places like Burnley in Lancashire, where I am?
They don't need this other nail in the coffin, sort of thing, because it might be the final nail for a lot of people. If this continues, people are going to die.
I'm at a petrol station in West London, which after days of being dry finally has petrol and diesel. We'll be looking at the Sky News data, which reveals what fuels the supply crisis.
We hear from the victims of disability hate crime amidst a spike in online abuse.
I've been told that I should have been dropped on my head at birth. I've been told that I should have been aborted. I've been told that I'm a drain on society, so just die quickly.
Jurassic Mark, the new dinosaur found in a Welsh quarry, thought to be related to a T-Rex, but the size of a chicken. Morning all. The Prime Minister will tell his party today that he will deal with the biggest issues that no government has had the guts to tackle, such as the economy, accusing his predecessors of drift and dither. His speech comes on the day, though, that the universal credit uplift ends. Sky's Joe Pike reports now from Manchester.
This conference has truly been the Boris Johnson show. There's only one star in town. But whilst there's been a lot on what he wants to do, we're still waiting for the how.
I think it's time for him to move beyond the rhetoric of levelling up to setting out what that means and how he plans to deliver it. I think what it means is a way of delivering equality of opportunity.
I'm looking forward to the PM's speech. I think it's going to be uplifting, it's going to be clear about our journey, and candidly it's about delivering, getting on with the job, as the theme of the conference says.
The Prime Minister is expected to say, after decades of drift and dither, this reforming government, this can-do government that got Brexit done, is getting the vaccine rollout done and is going to get social care done. We are dealing with the biggest underlying issues of our economy and society, the problems that no government has had the guts to tackle before. Among party members, views are mixed.
Well, I want to hear about the greening up of the economy, the freedom to act as a country, as an export nation, and international links.
I've been working in health and social care for 21 years, and so I've seen the highs and lows of health and social care. So for me, I'm really looking forward to the Prime Minister's speech around what reforms, not just the money, because you can put money at anything, but we need the reforms there. We need to recruit our own British doctors, nurses.
I want to hear about how we are going to support the areas of deprivation we have, the levelling of the gender. We want to make sure that there are opportunities for our youngest.
This conference has been big on rhetoric, but light on policy. After 11 years in power, after Brexit and COVID, there is now a need for direction and detail. But it's not clear if Boris Johnson will deliver it. The speech is due to start at 11:30. Joe Pike, Sky News, Manchester.
Well, clearly, all eyes on the Conservative Party conference today. That speech due at around about 11:30. As Joe says, lots of rhetoric has been around this conference week in Manchester. A number of announcements, perhaps, though, not as significant as previous party conferences might have led you to believe. Interestingly, about the speech today, we will be seeing Boris Johnson in a rather different format to that other cabinet ministers have had to enjoy. They have been in a somewhat smaller area right next to the conference floor, allowing them the joys of addressing the party faithful at the same time as hearing what has been going on the conference floor. Instead, we are told that the Prime Minister will be speaking in the round, in the middle of the room, surrounded by the party faithful. One person who we must assume will have a front row seat is the Justice Secretary and, of course, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab. Let's bring him in from Manchester now. Mr Raab, really good to see you this morning. How's conference been for you?
Well, good morning. Look, I think it's been great to get everyone back together in person. Our message is that we're building back better from this awful pandemic, and the government's getting on with the job, whether it's the support for workers and employers through the pandemic as we come out the other side, through to the reform of social care and dealing with the NHS backlog and the courts backlog, which is obviously dear to my heart given the Justice Brief.
Indeed, and we will move on to that in just a second. But you and I have spoken an awful lot, frankly, over the past year and a half. Largely, however, that has been when you were occupying a slightly different job, that of Foreign Secretary. Many people saw your move to Justice as a demotion. Was there any part of you aggrieved at the decision that the Prime Minister made?
No. Look, my job is to serve the government and ultimately the country. The Prime Minister has asked me to go back to the Ministry of Justice, where I've served twice before. I've been given the role of Deputy Prime Minister, which I'm honoured to do. And frankly, what I care about most is delivering on the courts backlog, given the aftermath of the appalling case of Sarah Everard, what more we can do to make women feel safer and confident in the criminal justice system and rehabilitating offenders more generally. So, to be honest with you, all of the media, if you like, side show, I tend to cut through and just get on with the job.
And it is a pretty tremendous job that you have in front of you, one has to say, tackling the problems with the courts, tackling the problems with the prisons. I just want to pick up on something, though, that we heard from both Kit Malthouse, the policing minister, and indeed the Prime Minister yesterday. A degree of pushback on the idea that the significant cuts that there have been, and you will concede there have been significant cuts to Ministry of Justice budget, to the CPS, to frontline policing, to activity in the courts, that those cuts have not had any effect on the conviction rates.
So first of all, let's get the numbers very straight. Since 2010, between 2010 and 2016, the MOJ budget, the spend, was reduced by roughly a quarter. That was us dealing with the aftermath of the economic crisis and the mess that the Labour Party made of it. From 2017 to current day, we increased the budget by 9%. But it's not just about money. So, for example, if you look at one of the measures that we're taking to come through the backlog, and in the civil law system, things like probate and divorce, we've had tremendous success in driving efficiency and better service for those that use the justice system, is digitisation and technology. So yes, investment is important. It's increased by 9% in my department since 2017, but there are other things. It's the way we do things that matter as well. And I think that's true for the experience of whether it's witnesses, victims, or the wider public of what they see and feel of the criminal justice system.
But just to pick you up on a specific sentence construction you just used there, that it is not just to do with the money. I would agree with that. It just seems, though, that Kit Malthouse yesterday, the Prime Minister yesterday, suggested that it's nothing to do with the cut in the budgets that we've seen at the MOJ.
Well, we've had an increase in the budget by 9% since 2017. So I'm making the point that, of course, it's important to invest in the right areas, but you've got to retain a responsible approach to the public finances altogether. And what I'm also saying, and I've got the advantage, as you said, Neil, coming back to the MOJ, I was Courts Minister in 2018. Let me give you 3 examples. GPS tagging, sobriety tags, and virtual giving of evidence, or pre-recorded giving evidence for vulnerable victims. In those 3 areas, we've seen game-changing shifts in the way the courts and the justice system approach matters. And that is probably the most exciting, or one of the most exciting things and opportunities for me in terms of the next 2 years, because those things can not only drive efficiencies and allow us to invest in different ways more effectively without just relying on extra dollops of cash, but also will deliver for, as I said, vulnerable victims, witnesses, and the average member of the citizen that has very little and pretty rare contact with the justice system, a much better service.
Just in terms, though, of the Sarah Everard situation and the inquiry that has been set up, why has that not been put on a statutory footing? As it is, the inquiry, not on a statutory footing, cannot compel witnesses to attend, cannot compel witnesses to give testimony. Given that one of the central accusations against the Met is that they close ranks when one of their own is targeted, surely this needs to be put on a statutory footing.
I think what people want is us to get cracking on this as soon as possible and to get to the truth. The inquiry that the Home Secretary... It'll work. And I think by the way, let's be clear, this needs to be looked at robustly, vigorously, without fear or favour. But I do also think that the police as a whole, and the vast majority of officers are appalled by this and want to get those answers too. And therefore, the inquiry...
How can you describe this as dealing with it robustly if we cannot compel people to give testimony?
We're not going to have a problem getting to the truth of this, because I'm telling you, I think the vast majority of officers will want to proactively support this. But there are two elements to it.
We're not, the vast majority of officers will want to contribute, but of course you're not suggesting that the bad eggs in the Metropolitan Police are anything other than a small minority. It's the small minority we're talking about here.
Absolutely, which is why the inquiry and the review that the Home Secretary announced will do, first of all, find out why and how Wayne Couzens could have risen through the ranks, and things like the flashing incidents and all the other, if you like, red flags that were going up, why they weren't taken more seriously. Secondly, it will look at systemic issues, cultural issues within the police. And I'm confident we will get to the bottom of this. And as Justice Secretary, we will have we're already through the review of rape cases and our violence against women and girls strategy. We're going to look root and branch at everything from, I'm talking about the experiences of female victims, at everything from the time it takes to examine a mobile phone in evidence, right the way through to, and we're already doing this, protecting vulnerable victims, giving evidence in court, so you don't find that on top of the appalling ordeal, physical and mental trauma they've been through, that the justice system isn't compounding that with the way that they're treated. So we will look at everything from top to bottom, and I've said it's my #1 priority to make sure women feel confidence in the justice system and confident in being able to walk the streets without having to look over their shoulder in fear.
Let's talk about the Prime Minister, the man to whom you are, of course, in your new role as Deputy Prime Minister, #2. What are we to make of the emphasis this week on wage growth as being not the be-all and end-all, but certainly an overwhelming priority for the Prime Minister? Is no one in government concerned that wage growth goes hand in hand with an increase in inflation?
Well, look, there's clearly, as we go through the pandemic, this issue of inflation, but the forecasts show that after this year it comes back down, and of course the Bank of England has a mandate to target 2%. But the paradigm shift we're seeing in the economy, something that was much discussed during the Brexit referendum, but is part of, as we come through the pandemic, the Prime Minister's overriding priorities. We've got a great record on bringing down unemployment, raising employment. The number of vacancies being advertised for those who are coming off benefits or who have been furloughed is remarkable. 2 million more jobs than were expected. But we also need to make sure people can afford to live, can afford to pay the bills. And that's why, with real wages rising, so over and above inflation on the latest quarterly figures, 6% above inflation compared to the same time last year, with the national living wage extended, saving the average worker eligible £4,000 a year, it is critically important. And what we're also saying is our vision is a high employment, high skilled, high wage economy, not reliant.
That is going to take an awful long time to get to. That is going to take a considerable amount of time, but it's going to take some time to get to, and it's certainly going to take a lot longer than, for example, a decision the Prime Minister could make like that and not take £20 a week off of some of the poorest working families, £20 a week off some of the poorest working families in the country. I mean, the statistics on this are really weird. We've got Ian Duncan-Smith on the programme later on, and he will rail against this. And the reason is 4.4 million households with 3.5 million children will see their incomes drop by more than £1,000, according to the Resolution Foundation. Why are we doing this?
So first of all, we carried and supported, the government supported 40 million people through furlough through this pandemic. We extended universal credit. That was always intended to be temporary. I've explained to you the national living wage. We've also made sure that we, through the extension of the personal allowance for income tax, saving every worker £1,200 a year. But just specifically on UC, we also announced, to get people off that risk of long-term unemployment and benefit reliance, including UC, a £2 billion kickstart package. Just one of the £400 billion billion that the Chancellor has introduced. So we are saying that, of course, the welfare system is there for those most in need. But what we want to do, and there's £2 billion going into the Kickstart scheme, it's been extended, is supporting people off benefits into work. That must be right over the longer term.
These aren't back-of-a-fag packet calculations. I mean, the Legatum Institute says that the extra support has protected 840,000 people from poverty in the second quarter of this year, including, and again, I know it's a motive to mention, but 290,000 children. I mean, what is your message directly to those who will be moved into poverty as a result of the ending of the £20 a week uplift today?
Well, of course, the emergency support we provided was because of the pandemic. As we come through the pandemic with youth unemployment going down, employment going up, we need to transition. We don't want to see people reliant on the welfare trap. We want to, where it's possible, and I know for not everyone, if someone's got a disability, that it'll be a different set of circumstances, there's targeted support there, but where it's possible, the right thing to do as we come through this pandemic, we've got employment rising, vacancies at a record
most of the people on universal credit are either in work or looking for work, though, Mr. Raab. I don't understand this argument.
And that's why, with wages through the national living wage, with the personal income tax, with not relying on the cheap drug of unskilled labour from abroad, our overall driving force of the economic plan is to see wages go up, and they have gone up. And I just cited to you the figures, the annualised figures for the latest quarter, that real wages over inflation have increased by 6%. We've got to start
the ONS says
relying
it's probably between
overly
3 and 4% in terms of wage growth, which is pretty much in line with where inflation is.
No. I checked this morning before I came on your show the latest ONS explanation, and it says 6%. If you strip out bonuses and those that get an uplift, it's 4.5%. Those are the figures, the latest figures that the ONS have provided. But look, the bottom line is the government wants to increase and promote the job creation that we've seen. That's relying on the entrepreneurs. We want to support the most vulnerable, but we've also got to transition people into higher paid jobs. That is the sustainable long-term solution, and I don't see any other party with a credible alternative.
Mr. Raab, we will be speaking again in the very near future, I'm sure. Good to see you this morning. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, we were just discussing it there. The £20 a week universal credit uplift ending today. The government has, as you just heard, defended the payments withdrawal, saying that taxpayers should not be subsidising low wages through the benefits system. Our communities correspondent Lisa Holland reports now from Burnley.
Hello. Your boiler won't come on.
James Anderson fears calls to his free heating and plumbing service will rise by 50% this winter, and a big part of that will be down to the changes in universal credit.
Families are under enough pressure as it is. Children are under enough pressure as it is. They don't need this other nail in the coffin, sort of thing, because it might be the final nail for a lot of people. If this continues, people are going to die. Simple as that.
That's quite a stark warning.
It is. It's the truth. People are going to die. Simple as that. And the sad fact, it could be children.
He's been a plumber for more than 20 years, but the rising cost of living has prompted James to start giving out food parcels. He's come to see Linton Lockett, who says he's already struggling to feed his family, even before the loss of the weekly £20 uplift payments.
You're just about pushing yourself in the positives to pay things and leaving you enough. But then when you take that, you have to work out everything else again. And before you know it, you've less money for your shopping, less money for your kids. And it's a losing battle. You can see the floor just went mouldy from where everything was just leaking, because even my washer started leaking from underneath.
It's not just food that Linton needs help with. A leaking tap in his kitchen has caused mouldy floors and walls and an infestation of fruit flies.
So I try not to let people in here.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I get embarrassed because I'm
but it's not your fault.
I'm not used to. Well, yeah, it's not my fault, but I get embarrassed.
Are you horrified by this?
Yes, I am horrified by it, but it's something that needs to be dealt with when it does. You can't ignore it. You can't leave it like this forever.
There are a lot of people in Burnley who need James's help. Nearly a quarter of working-age people here are on universal credit, including Kelly Constant.
The difference between me eating with the kids or having a couple of pieces of toast or something for tea.
But the government says the uplift payments were only ever meant to be a temporary measure and is offering support to get people to increase their working hours. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Burnley.
More on that throughout the show. But let's just bring you a little Sky News data analysis now around the petrol supply crisis. We can see when panic buying at petrol stations began, when you look at this graph here, with the rapid change in demand leading to sharp falls in fuel stock held at petrol stations. The average volume of fuel being sold per transaction, well, you can just see it there, jumped by more than 4 litres on the day that we saw panic buying begin. At the start of the crisis, 10 days ago, the number of trips to petrol stations, well, it was almost 5 times higher than normal. And although the crisis is easing, we are still seeing more trips to the petrol station than before, including one made by our correspondent, Laura Bundock, who joins us now. Laura, good to see you this morning. And, oh, well, it looks like you've actually managed to find one of the forecourts that has fuel.
I have. They're becoming a more common sight as well, Neil. Yeah, this petrol station in West London didn't have fuel for over a week, but it finally has. And I think those empty pumps are becoming less and less frequent. Things are looking up at the moment. But if you start to look at the data, we get a real picture of why panic buying led to such steep falls in fuel stocks. Firstly, if you look at the underground storage beneath these forecourts, it's normally at 40%, but as panic buying set in, it went down to 16.6%. And customers were buying more fuel. We normally buy 24.5 litres, but with panic buying, this went up to 29.82 litres. That extra 5 litres might not sound much, but when you combine that with a nearly trebling of customers, then you can see why there were shortages. If you look at the navigation data as well, it shows that there was a 190% increase in people driving to petrol stations from the 22nd to the 29th of September. And the reason the system couldn't cope is because forecourts operate on a just-in-time model. It means they're usually resupplied as they're about to go dry. It's a very cost-effective way of working. But the problem is, if you combine a change in demand, panic buying, with a shortage of drivers, then you have a big issue. Like I say, things are starting to improve at the moment. It might be easier to buy fuel now, Neil, but the bad news is it's also more expensive. Both petrol and diesel prices are now rising.
Many thanks indeed. Still to come on the show this morning, farmers, well, they're warning that more than 100,000 pigs could be culled because of a shortage of butchers. I'll be speaking to 2 pig farmers in just a few minutes' time. Then after that, I'll be speaking to the former British soldier Ben Slater, who was arrested and then released by the Taliban. And then at 7:45, promising trials from a revolutionary depression treatment that sends electrical pulses to stimulate the brain. I'll be discussing the findings with a professor of neuroscience. I think it's safe to say it has not been a particularly good week for Facebook's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. Not only has his company been hit by its worst ever outage, But he's also facing serious allegations from a former employee, Frances Hogan, about its approach to safeguarding children. Well, Mr. Zuckerberg has now hit back in a blog post saying this: "It's difficult to see coverage that misrepresents our work and our motives. At the most basic level, I think most of us just don't recognise the false picture of the company that is being painted." He released these words after the accusation against his company found their way to Washington yesterday, where Ms. Hogan had an audience with the US Senate. Here's what she told him.
Yesterday, we saw Facebook get taken off the internet. I don't know why it went down, but I know that for more than 5 hours, Facebook wasn't used to deepen divides, destabilize democracies, and make young girls and women feel bad about their bodies. Facebook has repeatedly misled the public about what its own research reveals about the safety of children, the efficacy of its artificial intelligence systems, and its role in spreading divisive and extreme messages.
The Prime Minister's High Representative for Afghanistan, Simon Gass, has met senior Taliban leaders in the country. It's the first meeting between British officials and the new Taliban leadership. The British delegation held talks with senior Taliban officials, including Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. They discussed how the UK can help with the humanitarian crisis and prevent terrorism, as well as ensuring the safety of those wishing to leave Afghanistan. Taiwan's defence minister says China will be capable of mounting a full-scale invasion of Taiwan in the next 4 years. It comes just days after record numbers of Chinese aircraft flew into the country's air defence zone, part of a pattern of what Taipei calls Beijing's continued harassment. Taiwan's defence minister says tensions with China are the worst they've been in more than 40 years. Let's take a quick look at the latest COVID data for the UK. There have been a further 33,869 new cases reported. 166 people have died after contracting COVID. That takes the total number of people who've lost their lives within 28 days of a positive test, of course, to 137,152. These are, once again, remarkable live images of the volcano on the Spanish island of La Palma, still throwing ash and lava into the air after first erupting more than 2.5 weeks ago. The volcano increased its explosive power yesterday, roaring louder and pushing thicker lava out of its main vent. Around 1,000 homes have so far been destroyed. And a quick look at the impact of climate change on the planet. The top line showing you how the UK's power is being generated, just a quarter this morning, coming from fossil fuels. Then you can see the rise in global temperature since records began. Then the estimated time till an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius, the point of no return, according to many climate scientists. And then at the bottom, the total carbon dioxide emissions in millions of tonnes. You can get all the latest on the Sky News Daily Climate Show. That's every evening, Monday to Friday at 6:30. Now, there's been a dramatic increase in online hate crimes against disabled people in the last year, according to police figures obtained by 2 charities. Leonard Cheshire and United Response said there were more than 9,000 disability hate crimes reported to police in England and Wales, but warned the problem is likely to be worse due to underreporting. The Crown Prosecution Service says it's committed to tackling all hate crime. Sky's Shaman Freeman-Powell reports.
Kerry Thompson is a busy woman. She's an activist, a blogger and a part-time charity worker. But in her spare time, she finds herself trawling through hate, left by faceless abusers online.
I've been told that I should have been dropped on my head at birth. I've been told that I should have been aborted. I've been told that I'm a drain on society, so just die quickly. It's not necessary.
And Kerry is not alone. Figures published by Leonard Cheshire and United Response reveal that online hate soared by more than 50% across England and Wales. And when people like Kerry speak up, she says nothing good comes out of it.
I reported it to the social media platform that I got the online hate for, to then get a message back 24 hours later to say that it didn't go against any of their guidelines.
The hate isn't just online, it's offline too. According to charities, in-person disability hate is also on the rise, something Becky Batten is all too familiar with.
Recently, last year, when I went to get some petrol, and just as I was sort of standing, filling the car up, I looked behind and there was 2 women in the car behind at the kind of windscreen with their phones filming me, you know, gratuitously. They saw me look at them, they didn't care, they just carried on.
Charities say that when it is reported to police, there are very few prosecutions.
The one thing that's most shocking is that only 1% of disability hate crimes are actually being charged or making it to the CPS, and that's something that really has to change. And one thing we're asking for is for there to be specialist disability liaison officers in police forces.
The charities want the police to have a better understanding of disability hate crimes and to take them seriously, so people like Becky and Kerry can live a life without hate. Siobhan Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Story of the day, this one. Scientists have identified the oldest known meat-eating dinosaur from the UK. The Pendrig milnerae was the size of a modern chicken. Not that scary. Would have been about 1 metre long with its tail. It lived around, well, over 200 million years ago in what is now Wales. Its name means chief dragon in Middle Welsh. I'll need to work on the pronunciation for next hour. We will be speaking to someone from the Natural History Museum about this fantastic story a little later in the programme. But coming up after the break, I'll be speaking to the former British soldier arrested by the Taliban last month, who has now been released. That's next. Welcome back. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, has told the programme he's not worried about rising inflation. That's as the government pledges to increase wages. Mr Raab says that inflation is on its way down at some point.
Well, look, there's clearly, as we go through the pandemic, this issue of inflation, but the forecasts show that after this year it comes back down, and of course the Bank of England has a mandate to target 2%. But the paradigm shift we're seeing in the economy, something that was much discussed during the Brexit referendum, but is part of, as we come through the pandemic, the Prime Minister's overriding priorities. We've got a great record on bringing down unemployment, raising employment. The number of vacancies being advertised for those who are coming off benefits or who have been furloughed is remarkable.
Let's bring in our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, joining us once again from the Tory conference in Manchester. It's almost over, Tamara. You'll be able to get home soon. But before that, we've got the little matter of the Prime Minister's speech.
That's right, and Dominic Raab really echoed what we expect to be the Prime Minister's quite breezy message that inflation may go up, the cost of living, the cost of everything in the shops may go up, but it will probably come down again next year, and that this is just something we have to get through, what the Prime Minister called the stresses and strains of transitioning, making a hugely important transition to a higher wage economy. Boris Johnson will be saying today that only he has had the guts to actually do this. Previous Prime Ministers, and he hints that they are both Labour and Conservative, have not had the guts to say, let's not have any more of what he calls the cheap drug of low-skilled migration. He wants people to have better paid jobs and businesses to invest in those. Of course, that does jar with what's happening outside this conference hall, people's bills going up, some of their benefits being taken away. He is gambling that that will all be just a temporary hitch and that the economy will keep on growing next year and everyone will feel the benefits of it. There are some MPs who are worried that it may not work out that way.
They certainly are. Tamara, for now, thank you. Pig farmers, they've been warning that more than 100,000 animals could be culled this year due to labour shortages. They're calling on the government to help stabilise the supply chain to avoid what they're calling the emotional and indeed financial disaster of needlessly killing thousands of pigs. I'm joined now by two pig farmers, Kate and Vicky Moore. Kate, Vicky, lovely to see you both this morning, and I think I even see one of the pigs in the background as well.
Lots of pigs. Lots of pigs.
Lots of them. Well, just bring us up to date with the situation as regards your farm. Have you been put in the position so far of having to cull any of your animals?
Okay, so we're really doing a juggling act, I suppose you'd say, at the moment with our animals. We are filling every shed that we've got, and we are basically emptying a shed on a Monday and refilling it on a Tuesday, whereas before it would normally have 2 weeks to rest, wash out, disinfect. So we're doing everything that we possibly can to avoid having to cull pigs on farm, because that is just barbaric.
Are you anticipating that you may well get to that point in the immediate future?
We're weeks away from it being an absolute disaster, so we are pleading with the government to do something to relax the visas and allow some EU people back in to do the skilled butchery jobs. We're desperate.
We heard from the Prime Minister yesterday that he doesn't think that it's his job. It's not the Prime Minister's job to sort out supply chain issues, and that industries like agriculture, like livestock, you know, it's down to you to try and sort this out. That you've had all the time, that you knew this was coming.
That's really easy for you guys to say.
Oops.
We get a contract from the processors, so we are contracted to sell X amount of pigs every year. And that contract hasn't changed. Brexit came and went, and we still had the contract. This is not a farmer's problem. This is further up the supply chain that should have been dealt with before now, and we're the ones left with the emotional and the financial hit, which is going to break us financially and emotionally. It's horrendous. No one should be forced to kill healthy animals when there's imports coming in of cheap meat that are filling the supermarket shelves. It's an absolute disgrace.
Have you ever been in the position before where you have had to cull healthy animals in that way?
No, because it's barbaric. It's wrong. You know, there's people starving in this world, and the Prime Minister is prepared to just allow healthy pigs to go to waste. It's an absolute joke. It's criminal. How can this be? Yeah, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And it's not the farmers' fault. He's punishing the farmers. We're farmers to produce food to feed the country, for God's sake. You know, we've got our labour, our staff. We've got our working conditions. We've got people who enjoy doing the job. It's not our problem, this, but it's been forced upon us, and it's us that've got to deal with it. And Boris Johnson needs to remember that we are unsubsidised. We have never been subsidised, the pig industry, and we are high wage payers, and we're exporters. You know, he needs to realise that we actually do bring quite a lot to this country, and he needs to support us right now.
Kate, Vicky, you've both mentioned during our conversation the emotional impact that culling your animals would have on you. I come from quite an agricultural part of the country. I understand the link between farmers and their livestock. But for those who haven't been blessed with that upbringing, just explain why you feel you might feel so emotional about it.
Because we care about them. Yeah, we're still producing. We're producing food, but it doesn't mean that we don't care about what we do. You know, the relationship is just ingrained. You can't. It's not it's respect from every part, and it's just been destroyed.
Do you feel that the Prime Minister has taken this as seriously as he might? I mean, he was speaking on Times Radio yesterday, asked about the crisis that you and other farmers are feeling, and he said, "I'm afraid they're eaten very often in this country. I don't know, do you have a bacon sandwich?" I mean, what do you make of comments like that from the man who's running the country at the moment?
He's just a buffoon, to be quite honest. If he does not understand the difference between culling a pig in an abattoir and killing and incinerating a pig on farm, which will not go into the food chain, I mean, we've got no hope, have we? It's just absolute ignorance. And whether he's done it intentionally or not, it just is a complete disregard for farming, pig farmers especially, but actually farming in general. Because like I say, we're producing food to feed the blooming nation. We worked all the way through COVID. There was no subsidies, no furlough for us. We kept day in, day out, doing what we do to produce food to fill the supermarket shelves, which now is just being filled by EU products. It's crazy because we haven't got our border controls sorted, yet the EU sorted theirs on the 1st of January.
Kate, Vicky, we're about to run out of time. We've heard from them, but we haven't yet seen perhaps the most important people in this interview, the pigs that I'm presuming are just down by your feet or just behind you. I'm wondering if we can have a quick look.
They're all just waking up. They're very chilled out.
Lucky them, lucky them. Kate Moore, Vicky Moore, great to have you on the programme this morning. Thanks very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Now, a former British soldier arrested by the Taliban last month has now been flown out of Afghanistan. Ben Slater was trying to help hundreds of people leave the country, and I'm very pleased to say Ben Slater joins us now. He is also the chairman of the Nomad Concepts Group, and he is with us now from Doha. Ben, great to have you on the programme this morning. Just wondering how you're feeling to be out of Afghanistan.
Good morning. Yes, obviously it's nice to obviously be out and obviously in Qatar and safe and well.
How were you treated by the Taliban? Clearly, there was considerable concern about risks to your own personal safety. I'm just wondering how you found the past few weeks.
Okay, I mean, obviously, as you're probably aware, I've been with them for, well, as of yesterday, approximately 5 weeks. So actually about 5 weeks in total. So the first 2 weeks, being honest, was not too pleasant. So basically what happened is that when I was obviously initially arrested, and we was held in Torkham for 3 days in a jail there, so like a concrete cell, basically just sitting on the floor. And that was obviously in isolation and captivity for 3 days there, where the initial interrogation started. And then basically from there, I was moved then to a detention prison jail, which was obviously used for interrogation and of more of the exotic kind of criminals or people that needed those facilities to be detained. So I was there for 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks were pretty bad conditions. What it was is that they'd obviously picked up on the fact that I was ex-military, and naturally that led to them thinking that I was obviously like a James Bond type character, basically. So as soon as that was mentioned, that I was possibly MI or MI5, basically I lost a lot of my rights, and I lost a lot of my sort of dignity, basically, for a couple of weeks. So there was a bit of obviously there was a few aggressive actions. The jail cell was basically on a par with what they kept mentioning, Guantanamo Bay. The conditions are quite similar. It was very hot, it was very crowded, and it was very, very unusual for me to be in that situation because, it was very much like that for 2 weeks, completely isolated, no communication, bag over the head, handcuffed, moved around, obviously a couple of, let's just say, beatings. Let's just be honest, okay, everyone's aware of it, so I might as well just say it. And then, of course, then there was the interview phases and getting moved around. And obviously, it was unusual for me because obviously the situation was, at that point for me, pretty dire, because obviously I knew that this wasn't good, and there was no way I could get any communication out. I was in the same jail as basically, unfortunately there was IS in there, there was Daesh in there, there was obviously some pretty nasty criminals in there that obviously the Taliban were also processing. So for me, it was a really unusual environment to be in. Then after the 2 weeks of that, basically the director, Dr. Bashir, the main sort of head in the Jalalabad area covering the Nangarhar province, which Torkham falls under, he realised that yes, obviously I was ex-military, and yes, I was obviously evacuating Afghan women out of the country, my staff, mainly and their families. And basically, but he did determine that I wasn't what he initially thought I was. So after that 2 week point,
which was useful, I suspect, Ben, which was incredibly useful, and then the treatment changed. I have to ask though, you came out of Afghanistan, I think, on the same plane that Sir Simon Gass was on, the UK's High Representative to Afghanistan. I mean, were they there to negotiate your release, or had that already been secured, agreed, before they spoke to the Taliban leadership?
Okay, I mean, look, I'd like to say, obviously, that the Home Office and the FCDO and obviously the UK government and the agencies involved, it's been absolutely fantastic. I mean, obviously, now I'm getting aware of what was actually done. So basically, in regards to Simon Gass and the Deputy Ambassador, or the Ambassador now in exile, we're basically there, obviously, having meetings about the delegation come in regarding the humanitarian issues and maybe how there could be possible engagement in the future to help the Afghan people, okay? And basically, I think, obviously, they took the opportunity, because I was there, obviously, when they come in, I think I was I would say I was like a Trojan horse to maybe start that dialogue and to say, like, oh, can you also release Benjamin? So that was why it was all very quick for me, because not only was the British ambassador has done a fantastic job in Qatar, Doha, and obviously Simon Bass and the Deputy Ambassador in exile for Afghanistan, and the Home Office, also the British High Commissioner and the consulate team had put a very creative plan in place to get me to Islamabad as well. So there was basically two embassies and the Home Office, and everyone was working as a collective. And I must admit, when I arrived, I was very surprised. I was very rushed. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't even know where I was going at that point. And obviously, to see Simon Bass and Martin, the ambassador in exile, that was obviously having the negotiations. Obviously, some of it was about me, and some of it was about the massive humanitarian issues that are ongoing.
Ben, we're really pushed for time. I just want to squeeze in a quick question. It's great that you have made it, and we're very, very pleased on your behalf and indeed for your friends and family. But what of those left behind? You're a former serviceman yourself. You understand the role that the interpreters played on the ground in Afghanistan for us. There are still lots of them waiting to come out of the country.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of people still there. Obviously, I am beginning dialogue with multiple countries, including the UK, to obviously organise visas and to obviously get some more of these at risk out that are still in. So obviously, there was a bit of miscommunication when I was initially arrested. Obviously, we still managed to get 112 people out. Okay, so we were very successful. Now we are trying to basically organise visas through the email system, through various governments. We're hoping the UK, Canada, USA, Australia and the European countries do kindly get in touch, or I can engage them and maybe get a few from each country, and then I can finish off the amount that are left behind. They're currently obviously keeping a low profile, and they're informing me every day.
Ben, I'm so sorry that we have to leave it there, but as said, really good to have you out of the country, and hope you continue to be well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Did you know that if we all work together, we can really make a difference to the air pollution around our schools?
Yeah, we should really do that.
Britain will have a mostly dry and sunny morning after early rain clears Norfolk. Ireland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, will see cloud and outbreaks of rain spreading in. It'll be a bit warmer. Cloud and rain will spread to Western Britain during the afternoon, heavy and persistent over Western Scotland, while Ireland and Northern Ireland will see patchy rain giving way to occasional drizzle. Clean air spreading from the Atlantic means that the air pollution index, where 1 means low pollution and 10 means very high, will be low everywhere.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
It was like my lens on the world changed. That's how the first person in the world who was given a groundbreaking new technology to treat her depression described the results. The device acts as a pacemaker for the brain, which emits small electrical pulses to keep the patient from falling into depressive states. Let's talk more about this with Professor of Neuroscience and Mental Health, Jonathan Reuser, who's been researching depression treatments at University College London. Professor, lovely to see you this morning. So explain exactly what this implant is and how exactly it works.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me on. So this is really a step forward in the deep brain stimulation technology as applied in depression. What the research team have done here is borrow techniques from other areas of functional brain surgery, as it's called, and done an amazing piece of work in this one patient, obviously very preliminary results. But what they've managed to do is to map the different regions where the symptoms may be coming from in terms of the neural activity. So they initially mapped these 10 regions. They found one region which seemed to correspond to the symptoms on a sort of day-by-day basis called the amygdala. And then they had an implant in a different region called the ventral striatum, where they found that if they stimulated, that could regulate activity in the amygdala. So that was the first step, which is different to usual. And then the final step is this closed loop approach, which is really the technological advance, where the stimulator and the recording device are hooked up together via a Bluetooth connection. And then the stimulator only turns on when excessive activity in the amygdala is actually detected. And it just does a short burst, I think they said 6 seconds in the paper. And that seemed to be enough to stop the patient's depressive symptoms emerging.
I mean, Professor, it's clearly working for Sarah. She is raving about this particular treatment. But I have to admit, my first thoughts when reading about this went straight to, electric shock therapy, which was for a while used, or perhaps even still is, used in treating some kind of mental conditions. This seems a country mile away from that, though.
Yeah, well, I should say that electric shock therapy, or ECT as it's sometimes called, is still used, certainly in the UK and the USA, many other countries, and it can be incredibly effective. So I wouldn't want to talk it down, but it is a much more blunt tool than this. There are other forms of brain stimulation, including ones that you can do non-invasively. One's called transcranial magnetic stimulation. But this one really does the application of the stimulation directly into the brain circuit that we think is responsible. So it's really incredibly precise. And when the surgeons are putting these stimulators in, they're aiming, for a millimeter cubed piece of tissue. So it's a totally different type of stimulation.
Professor Reuser, I'm sorry it was a short and sweet interview, but I'm glad that we had you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Stay with us. After the break, we will return to that interview with the Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab.